Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a fish? Or how about a bird, flying high above the earth, looking down on everything? Or maybe a cheetah, who can run faster than any other animal. The animals can do some amazing things. Have you ever wondered why God made you a boy or a girl instead of an animal? Well, He had a plan for you. You are a human being, a very special kind of creature. God made you the kind of creature that can do things that no other kind of animal will ever be able to do. And He made you this way so that you can come to know Him, love Him, and serve Him, and be truly happy with Him forever in heaven. Welcome to Truth in the Heart. My name is Sister Mary David, and I'm a Dominican Sister of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist from Ann Arbor, Michigan. This year on Truth in the Heart, our mission will be to find out what Jesus said about how we can be happy. Today, we'll begin by talking about you and me and all the people in the world. There are some things that make us human beings extra special, more special than trees or birds, flowers or rocks, cows or gorillas. Are you still wondering what it is that makes us human beings different from all the other creatures on earth? Why don't we begin with a few questions? Let's open to the first book of the Bible. Let's see. Do you know what it's called?
Is it Genesis?
You are correct. And in Genesis, we read about God creating all the creatures of the world. What we're going to look for is the creation of human beings. We want to see if there is anything special about it. Let's see. Here it is. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 27. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. Did you hear that? God made us to be like Himself. We know we are not God. God doesn't get sick or get in trouble like we do. He's all-powerful and all good, and yet we are like Him. God Himself said so. Our job now is to find out how we are like God. I'm going to ask you to use some of your best thinking and remembering. I want you to think about the world and all the things you've seen. Have you ever seen stars at night? Have you noticed earthworms? Have you ever seen a cactus, a huge mountain, or a yard full of dark green grass? God created all these things, and yet they can't do some of the things that we humans can do. To start with, they can't think. Can you even imagine a plant wondering what will happen tomorrow? But do you ever think about tomorrow? Do you wonder what will happen on your next birthday? Or maybe how you'll do on your spelling test tomorrow? We humans have the power to think about things. We can think, but plants and rocks can't. And neither can dogs or cats, cows or giraffes, snakes or spiders or any other animal. It might seem like your dog thinks and is smart. That's because God made animals with a certain ability to do what dogs are supposed to do. We call this instinct. They know to go to their food bowl for dinner and to run away from the bigger dog next door. This helps them survive. But have you ever heard of a dog who invented things? Have you ever seen a dog coloring a picture or driving a car? Of course not. A dog doesn't have the kind of mind to think of such things, to figure things out, to invent things. They can learn to do tricks, to respond to things around them, to follow orders from their master, and to catch frisbees, but this is a much lower level of brain work than what you and I can do. You and I can color. We can even figure out how to mix two colors and make a third color. We can write our names. People have figured out how to build houses, generate electricity, make yummy dinners. No dog or monkey, bird or hippopotamus could ever think like we think. This reminds me of something else I need to tell you. Because we human beings can think, we can also choose. We'll hear more about that after a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We've heard a lot about how we humans have a special ability to think. Sometimes it's good to remember that many of the saints were very smart. Often the greatest thinkers and writers in the church are called doctors of the church. One such person was St. John Chrysostom. He lived in what is now Turkey. His mother taught him from an early age, and then he studied hard under his teachers. He used his great mind and his beautiful way of explaining things to help draw other people to God. His name, Chrysostom, means golden-mouthed because the things he said were as beautiful as gold. His talking got him into trouble, though. On more than one occasion, he reminded people of what God expected of them. But some people did not want to hear it. They ran him out of town, even though he was already the patriarch or bishop of Constantinople. They did not want him around. Still, he never gave up telling people the true things about God. Today, over 1,000 years later, we still read his writings to learn more about God. Before our break, we learned that human beings have a special power of thinking and a special power of choosing that is unlike any powers that the animals have. God gave us our power to choose so that we can choose to love Him, so that we can choose to be happy. Rocks and plants can't be happy. Dogs and camels can't be happy in the same way we can either. Only human beings can love. Only we can be truly happy. True happiness comes when we live with God, and we will be fully happy only in heaven when we will be with God forever. But being with God in heaven isn't automatic. As we grow up, we grow in our ability to make choices, and if we want to be with God forever, we have to choose to be. Having the powers to think and to choose are some of the ways in which we are like God. Our free will is another way we're like God. God is free, and He made us free also. No one forced God to create the world. God did not have to create you or me. And no one forced Jesus to come to earth to die for us. In all of these cases, God freely chose to pour out His love on us. And no one can force us to love either. God made us free so that we could choose to love Him and other people. And when we choose to do good or to avoid evil, we are choosing to love Him. But God never forces us to choose the right thing. We are truly free. And many times each day we are given a choice between what is good and what is bad. Let's hear a little story about how some of the early Christians used their free will to choose to love God. The apostles lived with Jesus while He was on earth. After His resurrection and ascension, they began telling everyone about Him. Some of the religious leaders at the time were unhappy about this, so they arrested two of them, St. Peter and St. John. They commanded these apostles not to speak or teach about Jesus anymore. Then they released them. And do you think you know what Peter and John did? Well, they immediately began praising God, and then they continued telling people about Jesus. Now the leaders were really angry, so angry that they wanted to kill them. They had them arrested again and said, "We strictly charged you not to teach in this name, yet here you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching." Then the apostles made it clear that they had chosen to follow God. They said, "We must obey God rather than men." The leaders were not happy. Now this is where the apostles' free will came in again. They could do one of two things. They could either stop talking and keep themselves safe, or they could continue telling people about Jesus, even though this also meant risking their lives. They didn't have to do either one. They thought about what they should do, and then they chose one thing to do. A dog or a cat could never do such a thing. Animals instinctively get out of danger. People, though, can choose to do the dangerous thing if they know it's the right thing. And we know what Peter and John did. They continued to preach about Jesus and His resurrection. Years later, Peter would pay for it with his life, and John too would suffer greatly, all for Jesus. That is a great story. But what about you? Do you have the chance to do things like that? You sure do. You might not get arrested or risk your life, but many times each day you have the same opportunity that the apostles had. You have the chance to think and to choose what to do. Here's an example. Let's think about dinner time. You've come home from a long day at school and you feel like it's finally time to relax. You begin to play your favorite video game and are having a great time. And then mom calls, "Come to the table, everyone, dinner's ready." Well, what do? You have a choice. You could say, "Coming," and then go immediately to the kitchen. Or maybe you could say, "Coming," and then get one more play in on your game. In just a minute or two, you will be downstairs, even though that means that everyone is waiting for you. Or you could just pretend you didn't hear your mother and keep doing what you were doing before she called. You have a choice. And what's more, you are responsible for your choice. If you do the right thing, no one else takes the credit. And if you do the wrong thing, you can't blame anyone else. It's up to you. God gave you the ability to think and to choose. And you have the choice to obey quickly or to disobey. So what do? I hope you choose to obey and to come quickly, but I can't force you, and neither can Mom. And guess what? God doesn't force you either. He gave you free will, and He lets you choose. But I will tell you this, the more often you choose to do the right thing, the freer you are. It becomes actually easier to do the good thing than the bad thing. If you choose the bad thing, though, you've used your free will badly. If you do this a lot, it becomes harder and harder to do the right thing. You might even start to feel a little trapped, like your free will isn't really that free anymore. God gave you free will, and He gave it to you so that you could choose Him. And only when you do will you find true and everlasting happiness. It's important to remember that we are responsible for our free actions. Dogs and cats aren't responsible for their actions. We can make choices. They can't. For example, if your dog doesn't come when you call her, you might say, "Bad dog," and then go get her. But you wouldn't ground her for disobeying you. Animals aren't responsible for their actions like you and I are. Here's another example. If a man gets into a fist fight and hurts somebody, he may be arrested. He would have to go to court and tell what happened, what he did and why, and then he would receive a punishment. That's because he's responsible for what he does. No one made him punch anyone. He chose to do it. But if your dog bit someone, the dog wouldn't get arrested. We wouldn't sit him down and ask him what happened and why he did it. The dog's not responsible for his actions. He didn't choose to bite someone. Either he was sick or he was responding to what seemed like danger. He was just protecting himself. He just did it. He doesn't even know that we would say it's bad to bite someone. He wouldn't get in trouble the same way we do when we do something wrong. Now you might be thinking, it'd be better to be a dog, then you'd never get in trouble. But there's more to it. There are lots of things you can do because you can think and choose. Things that a dog could never do. You can read, color, and invent. You can write stories and help take care of your little sister. And the most important thing that you can do is to choose to love God. Animals can't do this. They cannot love God with their mind and heart. And if they were taken to heaven, they wouldn't know that God was there or what was going on anyway. The only creature on earth that can love God is a human being. And that means that only we humans can be truly happy. In our next episodes, we will find out more about being happy with God. But before we end today, I want to tell you about one more thing that helps us to think and to choose the good. It is called grace. Do you remember your baptism? Probably not. Most likely you were a baby. And even though you may not have known what was happening at the moment, it was the most important day of your life. When you were baptized, God came to live in you. And do you know what we call this life of God in our souls?
Is it grace?
Yes, grace is God's life in us. And when God comes to live in us, we are raised up to be a new kind of creature. Now, we are not only the children of our parents. When we were baptized, we also became someone else's children. Do you know whose child you became when you were baptized?
Children of God.
That's right. And as His children, He lives in us and works in us in a very real way. God made us the kind of creature that is able to think and to choose, and He gave us freedom to love Him. But God doesn't expect us to do this all by ourselves. Instead, He comes so very close to us that He lives in us, and He moves us to do all the good that we do. He always loves us, and by His grace, He makes us able to choose to love Him more and more. Here's an example. You may have noticed that it is often hard to do what is good. If you're about to get in trouble, sometimes it seems easier to lie than to tell the truth. But God's grace is working in you, and it strengthens you and moves you to choose to tell the truth. God doesn't force you to tell the truth, but He gives you all that you need so that you can choose to do what is right. Now it's time for our Saint Scramble. See if you can answer the question about the saint before you see the picture. First, do you remember the saint whose name means golden-mouthed because when he spoke of God, it seemed that his words were as beautiful as gold? Some people didn't like what he had to say and chased him out of town. His name is hard to say.
St. John Chrysostom.
That's right, it's St. John Chrysostom. Here's the next one. Which two apostles were arrested for speaking about Jesus? They told the people who arrested them, "We must obey God rather than men."
St. Peter and St. John.
That's correct. Peter and St. John and all the holy apostles courageously told many, many people about Jesus. Thanks to them, we know about Jesus today. Whew, we talked about some very important things today. We learned about the special powers that we humans have. Do you remember what they are? We can think and we can choose. And who is living in us to help us choose the good? God is. His life in us is called grace. God made you and me this way so that we will be able to freely choose to love Him. And when we do this, we will find true happiness. Our next episode is all about happiness. Tune in next time to hear about what will make you truly happy.